Welcome to Green Dot Daily, live every weekday at 3 Eastern on the Action app. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. I'm Maria Marino. And coming up on the show, we'll talk Bruins, Leafs, and more with Tim Kalinowski. But we start with what's sure to be a spicy night in the NBA. We got a pair of elimination games in the early window. Bucks getting 8.5 on the road. We'll try to fend off the Pacers. 51% of the handle is on Milwaukee, 91% of the handle on the over 217. And then in prime time, it's Knicks and Sixers back in Philadelphia. 63% of the handle is on the home team laying 3, 97% of the handle on the over 201.5. As we bring in our Action Network contributor, Bryan Fonseca, and I gotta talk Knicks Sixers with you. This series has been full of drama. It's been back and forth. And if that wasn't enough, we found out Scott Foster will be the lead official in the game tonight. Across all major sports, is there any other official that you can name that is a household name? I don't think so. Scott Foster has such a rep, especially as the quote unquote extender. So what do you make of how this game could play out because of that?
Yeah, add to the theater of this. Listen, I can't believe we're only in round one still. Like it feels like we've been doing this for a while and it's still just round one of the playoffs. I feel like I'm gonna collapse. Teams up 3-2 in the series as the Knicks are right now. 12-6 straight up in game six with Scott Foster. That's a pro Knicks stat that I got from our guy Evan Abrams, who supplied me with all the Scott Foster data that we needed to know before this. So shout out to Evan. Thank you for that. In games 5 through 7 of a series, teams who lost the previous game, so that would be the Knicks in this equation, are 20-33 against the spread with Scott Foster. That's the worst of 58 officials. I'm not calling shenanigans on that one, but that's the worst of 58 officials. So that's a pro Philly thing. And another one that Philly fans would like is that since 2020, 2021, so for context, that's the season after the bubble. So that was when fans were starting to be allowed back into arenas during that year. Home teams 33-18 straight up with Foster in the playoffs. And obviously Philly's at home here. I think, there's some validity to the extender stuff. I don't think it's quite as hyperbolic as people would say. And that's disappointing because as a wrestling fan, the idea of having a heel rogue official would be amazing. But that's not necessarily going to be the case. So I think here, you kind of have to just rock with the whole team, it seems like. And some of these home team metrics, I don't think are necessarily as sketchy as it's, hey, home teams win in the playoffs, often on their own home court. Like that's all it sort of screams out to me. But yeah, Scott Foster adding to the drama. Like I couldn't have picked a better game for him to officiate other than a potential game 7.
Yeah. And even when you set aside the aspect of, just flat out who's going to win this game, this series has been extremely physical. We've had multiple instances of flagrant fouls. We even had a situation in which you could argue that Joel Embiid could have been ejected. And so I think Foster really comes into play just with some of these chippy situations that we could see in the game tonight. That being said, we've been talking about it. It's really hard to pick a side here. What are you comfortable betting tonight?
The only bet that I have for the game right now, because I can only get to one, is Joel Embiid under 30.5 points. And it feels disrespectful, but Joel Embiid's gotten this over twice in the series. One of them was a 50-point game, so hats off to him. But Maria, he has one working leg.
Yeah.
Half of his face is hurt. And as somebody who's had a family member with Bell's palsy multiple times, I don't even know how he's playing basketball right now, honestly. On top of all the other injuries, he just looks like he's in pain the entire series. Every time he gets contact or falls. I mean, it just looks ridiculous. He's taking more threes than he has been. 6.8 per game in the playoffs. He's only converting 32%. The field goal attempts are there because he's still putting up shots, but all of his shots are further and further away from the cup. He's shooting fewer of his shots in the playoffs than he was in the regular season, from 0 to 3 feet, from 4 to 10, from 10 to 16. Up until you get into that deep mid range, which the Knicks are kind of conceding. They're like, listen, you could shoot that if you want to. Joel Embiid's not feeling like he's able to use his physicality, evidently. 16.3% of his shots came from three during the regular season. That's basically doubled in the playoffs because he's shooting so many threes and he's not making a ton of them. So I like the under here. I think it's going to be a physical game. I would probably even lean under for the total, but it's so low. And even as someone who loves muddy, ugly, disgusting Eastern Conference basketball, love it.
Yeah.
I look at that 199, 200 range, and I'm kind of like, oh man, I don't even know if I could stomach that. But I do think it's going to be another rock fight
Yeah.
where we're going to see a lot of rebounds and ugly stat lines and second chance points and things of that nature. But it's going to be a lot of fun.
You have to wonder about fatigue for Embiid as the series has gone on. Last game, his lowest scoring output of the series. He had 19 points, had a triple double, almost a quadruple double, including turnovers. I was screaming at my TV, stop playing through Embiid, play through Maxey. The dude's a stud. Embiid can't, like, he just didn't look right. So I'm totally on board with this. Either way, Bryan Fonseca, it's going to be a great game. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Can't wait for it.
Keeping in the NBA playoffs, we have our first matchup set for the second round, Nuggets and Timberwolves. This is a rematch from last year's first round when Denver won 4-1. This season, these teams stack up pretty evenly. They split their regular season meetings, and Denver is favored to win the series once again. Great to have NBA expert Brandon Anderson back on GDD. And one of your specialties is future picks as well as just breaking down the series ahead of time. So we really want your opinion on this second round series between the T-Wolves and Nuggets. It's going to start on Saturday. This should be an all-time great series.
Yeah, this looks awesome. We had a lot of fun talking this on the podcast. And my favorite bet here is actually a series leader bet. I like Jamal Murray, not Nikola Jokic, to lead the series in assists. Plus 900. That's a long number, but this is a multi-unit play for me. So you talked about the regular season. You talk about last year's series, how competitive things were. And to me, the biggest takeaway, especially this season, Minnesota wants to turn Jokic into a scorer, not a facilitator. So if you look at the games from the regular season, 4 games, Jokic scored 25 or more in all 4 games. He averaged 33.3 points per game. Assists, though, our man Jokic, best big man passer of all time, 3 assists, 2 assists, 5 and 7. He only averaged 4.3 per game against the Timberwolves. And on potential assists, which is another good underlying number to look at, 6, 7, 14, and 10. Those are low numbers for him also. And the 14 was one game when Jamal Murray was out. So even with Murray, the numbers are even lower. So he averaged 9.3 potential assists. That's down from 15 the rest of the season. He averaged 4.3 assists per game, down from 9 the rest of the season. So that is a big swing. It has to do with Minnesota, their size, their physicality, the way they're playing him. Denver starting point guard in those games. Again, one game was Reggie Jackson, 8.3 assists per game on 13 potential assists. So I think we see something similar to what we saw in the finals last year. Another great defensive team. What did Miami do? They pushed Jokic to be a scorer, not a passer. And this was a bet we played and won in the finals in 5 games. Jamal Murray had 50 assists, 10 per game. Jokic only 36. Minnesota guys, I think, are not in play here. This is a head-to-head bet between the two Nuggets. And I think Denver, this sets up really well for a big Jamal Murray passing series. So give me the 9-1 on assist leader for him.
I really love that you're reminding me of this storyline. It's all coming back to me as far as last postseason and this whole idea of Jokic as a scorer instead of a facilitator, because it seems like when he's in that passing role, the offense just flows so well. So I really like this as a strategy. And Murray, by the way, averaging 7.2 assists per game in round 1 against the Lakers, but he was called upon to be a scorer quite a bit in that series. Maybe we'll see him switch it up a little bit and show his versatility in the second round. Now, here's the big question. Who do you see taking this series?
I'm going with some logic and a little bit with my heart, and my Timberwolves both in 6 plus 550. Now, let me explain, because there's a lot of nuance to this one. So we, of course, went deep into this series. Me and Matt Moore on buckets, a full 80 minutes. If you want to go in the weeds, I don't think we have ever gone into the weeds as far as we did on this one. Timberwolves edges you like here, the physicality, the depth. I think depth is going to be a big deal here, especially as the series wears on, and a defense that quite literally was built to defend Denver. Literally, the guy building the team came over from Denver and was like, how do we stop this thing I've created there, and built this. On the Nuggets side, you got the best player in Jokic. You got the clutch factor in close games. You got the experience. They've been here before. And in home court, I think is a really big deal in the series too. So I ultimately come down on the side of Denver if I had to pick straight up. But we're bettors, Maria. We don't get to pick straight up. We don't just get to make up our own odds. Denver's minus 190 on the series. That's 65%. I can't get there. I think this is way too close of a series. Quite frankly, I think Denver is lucky to have home court in the series, or I might just be looking at Minnesota straight up that way. That's how close it is. So I thought, okay, how do I get to a bet here then? How about Denver minus 1.5? So Denver in 6 or less. Well, no, I think I need game 7. Game 7 to me in Denver, in the altitude, a winner take all game with all of Denver's experience. That to me is the one game I would be most certain of an outcome of. That's a Denver win based on what we know about historic game 7s. So now I'm starting to rule out options. I don't see Minnesota getting there in 7. I don't think they're going to sweep them out of here. Game 5 is still a short series. Close out in Denver, in altitude, short rest. I don't love that. So now I'm left with just Timberwolves in 6. And if I look at the numbers here, plus 550, effectively, I need the Wolves in 6 to be the way the Timberwolves win the series at least 42% of the time, based on the math there. And I just think there's an edge on the number to Minnesota. There's an edge on Wolves in 6 within that scenario. So even though I think the Nuggets have the slight edge here, it's a numbers play. We got to play the number. And I have not had a real chance to back my Timberwolves all season, and I'm excited to do that here. This is not a homer pick. If you know me at all, I am the last one to homer pick Minnesota. I'm a sports nihilist. I expect the worst at all times. I think the Timberwolves really have a shot here, and I like Wolves in 6 plus 550.
I really agree with you. I think you made a case for the numbers, and I understand that. But from a narrative standpoint too, I just really feel like this Timberwolves squad has taken a step up from a season ago. I think Anthony Edwards has solidified himself as a superstar. Like, they're in a new class, and Denver, they're trying to meet Denver at that level, but I think it's going to be really close. So I would love to see this go 6 and give this play a shot for you. All right, let's move on to tonight and get a couple quick picks from you. And we got to start with, I think it's the juicier game. It was put in prime time. Knicks, Sixers. Give us your best bet for that matchup.
Yeah, to me, the one thing we know in this series, it's been a wild series, very entertaining series, back and forth, crazy comebacks. The only thing I know for sure is that those precious few minutes when Joel Embiid's not on the court do not go well for Philadelphia, right? I don't need to make the case for that. We know. Here's the numbers. 209 minutes with Embiid, plus 48 for the series. 36 minutes without, minus 46. We're basically even for the series because poor Joel Embiid sat 36 minutes in 5 games. So when do I know Embiid's not going to play for at least part? Give me Knicks second quarter money line, plus 110. Second quarter is the one portion that we know we're going to get 3, 4, 5 minutes without Embiid. I don't know if he plays the whole second half. I'm not really sure what that rotation looks like, but the Knicks have won all 5 second quarters by an average of almost 10 points a game this series. So I think that's the way you bet them tonight. You can even play second quarter minus 3.5 at plus 200 if you want to add a little juice to that and make it worth your while.
Man, yeah, I'm so, once again, I'm glad that you're just breaking this down so simply in terms of it's just with or without Embiid, because I certainly noticed, like, okay, it seems like every first quarter, Philly's coming out, they're the better team, and then somehow, the Knicks get back into it in the second quarter. It's simple. Embiid on versus Embiid off.
It is.
All right, one other game, and I feel like I might be downplaying it a little bit, but I also feel like there is a whole lot of drama in this series as well between the Pacers and the Bucks, and a lot on the line. What do you like in that one?
Yeah, the presumably shorthanded Bucks. We don't know for sure based on the news we're seeing now, but presumably the Indiana Pacers, the big difference is their deep bench. And at home, that's where the bench guys play well, right? So I think you want to back a role player here. I'm going to go with Obi Toppin. Give me his over 8.5 points. He had on the road this series 4, 9, and 12. So he's still an over in 2 of the 3, 8.3 points a game on the road. At home, 13 points and 15 points. So his 2 best games of the series at home. That's just, it's a crowd, it's an energy thing. They're getting out, they're getting some of those alley-oops, they're getting some easy buckets. That's what Obi Toppin is made to do. He's over this line in 4 of the 5 games in the series anyway. He's way over at home. So I'm just going to play Obi and we'll see what happens with the game.
You know, Obi Toppin, I got to say, I'm proud of him. I feel like watching these games in Indiana, I'm like, wow, Obi Toppin has grown up and like he has really performed well and he has played to the crowd. Such a crowd pleaser there at home. So love this play as well. I know I'm like gushing over all your picks, but Brandon Anderson, great to have you. And by the way, we've mentioned it, but for more where this came from, make sure you check out the latest Buckets podcast because that's where the real deep dive happens. But Brandon, thanks again.
Thanks, Maria.
Over to hockey, the Bruins and Maple Leafs are the lone game on the slate tonight as we throw it back to last year's playoffs where the Bruins found themselves in a similar situation in the first round, up 3-1, but they couldn't seal the deal and collapsed against the Panthers. Feels very familiar to what we've seen thus far in the series against the Leafs. So let's welcome in Tim Kalinowski, the hockey guy, Boston resident, back to the show. Are you starting to feel the deja vu? And are you concerned about this series?
Yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly concerned. I don't know how you couldn't feel that way. I'll lay it out like this. On the bright side for Bruins fans, you know, Coach Montgomery got a lot of heat for his lineup changes in Game 5. But one thing I would note is Boston, in the 2 games they've lost, they haven't finished the game with the same defenseman that started the game. They had Andrew Peeke go out in Game 2, and then Carlo didn't play the overtime in Game 5. So for me, like that would be, one thing I would be touting if I was a Bruins fan to make myself feel better. And then on the other hand, I've been listening to a lot of Toronto radio this week, and they're kind of calling it a ghost off. The Leafs have their own demons. They have lost 6 straight at home. They couldn't get out of the first round until last year, and obviously Boston as well. So I think it's actually an advantage though for the Bruins to be on the road for this game. I think that it's especially tough and for the Bruins, especially they feel this added pressure at home. The Leafs obviously have felt it as well for the last couple of years. So that I think is the one good thing.
I just have to say, listening to Toronto radio, I don't know if you're like, I mean, that sounds like a spy thing to do, but also very smart. That being said, as you look at this game tonight, what's the pick?
Yeah, well, to just say about Toronto radio, I listen to it year round because the Leafs are just the most fascinating story all the time in sport. The hockey world starts with Toronto, and it's always a bit of a soap opera. And speaking of that, Austin Matthews sounds like he's going to be out again tonight for Game 6. And that leads me to my pick here on the Bruins on the puck line, the -1.5. I like it. You can get plus 215 on this. And basically what this comes down to for me is Leboff actually pointed this out, one of my co-hosts on Line Change, is that the Bruins have won all their games in this series by, 2 goals or more, covering that puck line. Boston has been, look, we know they're 0-4 in closeout games the last 2 years. However, if you think about it, road teams have actually been more profitable in the playoffs this year. So I think that's an added advantage for the Bruins, like I said, being away from home. This series, funny enough, is 8-8 when it's been played 5-on-5. Toronto's power play is 1 for 17. They haven't been competent at all on the power play, and I don't expect it to get better with no Austin Matthews out there. So for me, if the Bruins are going to win this game, and I'll add this as well, in the 5 games that we've seen 10 teams eliminated in the playoffs this season, the puck line has been covered in 4 or 5 of those because you usually get that early goalie pull, which, again, more opportunities to bang in the empty netter. So if I like the Bruins here, that's why I'm going to take him on the puck line to hopefully get some empty net variance as well.
All right, so expecting some redemption here for the Bruins. I wish you luck on that, and particularly with the anxiety part of things. Let's look at tomorrow's games now. We got Canucks Predators, Stars Golden Knights. Any betting advice for how to attack those?
Yeah, look, I mean, this playoff anxiety, it's why we do it, right? It's why we like sports. I always say I could just go read Harry Potter and play an instrument if I didn't want to do this. But you know, I mentioned it about road teams doing well in the playoffs. They're 22-17 in this playoffs. And look, the Stars and the Knights have been the embodiment of that. They flip-flopped their 2 games, their first and second, and then 3 and 4. And I would say that especially in these games where a team is facing elimination, there tends to be too much home ice and must win baked into these numbers. So like for just Dallas example, they closed -118 at Vegas in game 3 and then -125 in Vegas in game 4. And this line hasn't reached that 125 number yet. So for me, I actually have a future on Dallas. I took them to win the cup 25-1 from the advice of Nick Martin and Michael Leboff when they were down 0-2. So I'm already invested in Dallas here, but if I wasn't already, I would still be playing them. And just to add to the Vancouver-Nashville series, I would just say, again, a little too much home ice baked in here, a little too much must win. If I didn't have Nashville to win the series, I'd be looking to take Vancouver as the dog because the series has been that tight.
Got it. Appreciate the insight there. But I do want to also look ahead to round 2, where we know the Rangers and the Hurricanes will be facing off. This is starting in a couple of days here, but you have a feel for how this one is going to go.
Yeah, I do. And I like this bet a lot. Over 5.5 total games in this series. I bet this in the Boston-Toronto series. I also bet it in the Nashville-Vancouver series. And you look at it -188, you're saying, I don't want to lay that. I don't want to have that invested for over 10 days or so. But I would tell you this, it's basically you're getting a better price than what you would if you just bet the series to end in game 6 at 2-1 or the series to end in game 7 at +205. Basically, you're going to win and lose one of those, and it's going to come out to essentially what this bet is. And this bet is actually cheaper than that. So, you know, that's kind of what these books do. You have to lay it sometimes if you really want it. And to me, the series is going to be super close. Both of these teams in their previous series played extremely tight 5-on-5 with their inferior matched opponents, the Islanders and the Washington Capitals. But both of these teams are top 5 in special teams during the regular season. So I just see it being very even 5-on-5 from what we've just seen, and then very even in terms of the special teams matchup. And I actually give the Rangers an edge here with them going 6 for 16 with 2 shorthanded goals against Washington in their series. Carolina is the favorite, but if the Rangers can do what they're capable of doing on the power play, this is going 6+.
Definitely could see it. Nice early look there. What a time for New York, by the way. Could you imagine if the Knicks advance as well, Rangers into the second round? Tim Kalinowski, thanks so much. Appreciate you joining the show.
Thanks for it. Anytime.
Remember, any picks we give out here on GDD, you can easily reference. Follow Green Dot Daily in the Action app. We keep track so you don't have to. And that's going to do it for the show. I'm Maria Marino. Thank you for hanging with me. The show will be back tomorrow at 3 Eastern on the Action app and YouTube channel. Have a great night.